Hey guys, let's talk about tonight's episode of The Walking Dead. And we pick up where we left off last week a little bit. As you know, I was glowing ear from last week because of what happened between Rick and Michonne. And we pretty much follow up like it's the morning and people are confused as to who this new guy is. And of course, when everybody sees him, it's sort of like they're walking in on Rick and Michonne. So he's sitting on the steps and Carl comes out and he's like, "What are you doing in my house, in our house?" And he's like, "I'm sitting on the steps. My name is Jesus. I'm waiting for your mom and dad to get dressed." And he's like, and then looks around and Rick comes out of the room and he's like trying to do up his clothes and Michonne comes out like right behind him. So awkward, but he later on says to him, "Look, I was going to talk to you about me and Michonne, but it literally just happened last night." And of course, Carl is super cool about it, which is really cool. We had some weird stuff going on with Abraham in this episode. So at first he was talking to Sasha, then he was in bed with Rosita. He was having flashes of Sasha. She gives him a chain. He's still having flashes of Sasha, like giving him the peace sign because Sasha basically tells him that she's no longer going to be doing these walkabouts with him and that Eugene is going to take over. So I don't know. And then she gives him a necklace, and then he's carrying it, and he's asking all these weird questions. He's asking Glenn, you know, why would you make this decision to have a child? Then he asks Daryl, like, when do you think Michonne settled for Rick? And then, or if they've been shacking up, and he's like, when do you think they settled for each other? And he's like, do you really think she settled for him? And he was just having all these like existential thoughts, I guess, in this episode. And then there's this huge scene where there's this fight, an attack scene, and he gets knocked to the ground. He's being strangled, and then all of a sudden he's laying there, and Daryl goes up to him and he's like, "Are you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm like better than good." And he gets up, and the chain is off of his neck. So I feel like that's basically him saying he feels freed from this relationship from Rosita. I mean, a few episodes ago he was talking about hooking up with Sasha, maybe, or I don't know what is going on with Abraham, but kind of weird. So in this episode, we finally get to find out a little bit about Jesus and where he's from, and he's from this community called the Hilltop, and he has his leader in that community and his name is Gregory. And so basically Maggie and Glenn and Daryl and Michonne and Rick and Abraham go to this community to try to do some trades because they're running very low on food and they need help. And it sounds like this community might be able to help them out. And they have a lot of guns, and they're thinking, okay, well, maybe we can do these trades, and we can, you can help us out, we'll help you out. We're not going to attack you because you seem like normal people like we do. But then we quickly find out that Negan has taken one of their guys, his name is Craig, and his brother comes back and he basically says, "I have to do something here," and he stabs Gregory. Then all hell ensues. Rick always ends up with blood all over him somehow. So he ends up getting in a fight with this dude who stabbed Gregory. Then he stabs him in the throat. Then I guess his girlfriend punches Rick, and then Michonne just boom takes her down. She's like, "I don't think so. Not my man." Hilarious. And so that happens, and then later on, Gregory's all good, and then Maggie goes in to negotiate a deal, and I guess what the deal they decided was if Rick's team goes and gets their boy Craig back and kills this Negan guy, then we want half of your food, half of your supplies, all this. So he's basically like, "Look, we'll take care of your Negan problem for you, and you got to give us half of your food and half of all this." So a deal has now been struck. Maggie is the one who actually went in and brokered this deal with Gregory while he's laying up in bed. He's a bit of a creeper, that one. But yeah, it looks like that's the plan moving forward. I don't know if this is such a great plan on Rick's group's part. They're like, "Oh, this is basically what we do. We go into for war and we fight and we win." And I do like that because it is true. But we have not seen who Negan is. We've seen who some of his people are, who were crazy, and Daryl blew them all up. But yeah, I don't know if this plan is a great plan because looking at the people who he's about to go to this community with, it means we could lose somebody. We could lose Michonne. We could lose Abraham. We could lose Daryl. We could lose Greg. Maggie. We could lose Glenn. Like, these are some top people here, people. What? So, yeah, I'm a little nervous about this plan moving forwards. They've taken Jesus and this other guy with them. Whatever, who cares? But yeah, a little bit wary of our team here. So, yeah, it was a pretty solid episode, some little giggles in there. And so, of course, Rick tells Carl, of course, about his little night with Michonne, but he says this is different, which is kind of nice because I know last week everyone was like, "Is this for real? Is this a fling? Is this a one night stand?" I'm like, people, come on now. There is no way that they were going to do this 3 season build up to make a hookup between Rick and Michonne a fling. There was just no way. So I like that he said this is different, and I'm hoping different obviously is a good thing and that she's gonna last. There's a scene where they're driving and then Rick puts his hand on her leg and she smiles, and it's like, when is the last time we've seen Michonne smile really out of pure joy? Never. So to see again some of the layers of her hard shell chipping away is great to see because Michonne has been a very fascinating character and she has definitely opened up in the last 2 seasons, but let's face it, she's just got that tough as nails vibe about her and you just don't want to get in her way. So it was nice to see that. And then of course he checks in at the end and he's like, "Are you sure about this?" And she's like, "Well, this is going to be messy, but we're going to get through it." And he's like, we have to. So it'll be interesting. But it was also interesting to hear that Negan basically killed a 16-year-old boy when he first arrived at Hilltop Community because he was basically trying to prove who he was and what he would do. So yeah, that's not good either. Okay, guys, let me know what you thought of this week's episode. I enjoyed it. Getting to know a little bit more about Jesus. I find that Jesus is a character who, even though he doesn't run the Hilltop community, he runs the Hilltop community. Let's face it. He is the go-between between Gregory and the people, but he seems like he's the man on the ground running all the kind of ops. So I would basically say that he is the ringleader, but Gregory thinks he's the ringleader. But let's face it, Jesus really is Rick. Bottom line. So yeah. All right, guys. Oh, and then I like the end scene when they're basically Maggie and Glenn go to the doctor and they do an ultrasound and they get a sonogram and then they're on the RV and they're leaving and then Glenn shows the picture to Michonne and she kind of smiles and then kind of her face kind of drops and then she passes it over to Daryl and then he passes it to, so it was a nice little family moment because let's face it, these guys are family and what affects one affects the other. So it was nice that they had that nice touching moment with the group before things go to hell in a handbasket real quick. So I liked that. I kind of still think that the Glenn and Maggie stuff, like we just didn't really get that wonderful embrace that these two should have had 2 episodes ago once the horde was gone and they were reunited after one thinking that Glenn was dead and then 2, Maggie almost biting it up on that whatever she was hanging on for dear life with. So, yeah, I found that their first scene together was a little weak because we haven't really seen a joyous reunion between the two of them after all that, time apart and then her thinking that he had died. So, anyway, that's it for me, guys. Let me know what you thought of this week's episode. What was going on with Abraham and all these thoughts that he was having and thoughts of Sasha and then, is him and Rosita done? They had a long bedroom scene together, so I don't know. We'll see what happens. Okay, guys, that's it for me. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next week.